Yes. I do see the surveys, but they're anonymous too, so don't feel like, you've got to pull any punches because I know who you are. It's not like that. So, yeah, that's the deal.
I'm like, Morley.
Yeah.
That's the whole survey.
What? Yeah, I know a lot of people had to sort of mention me by name because I wasn't listed in there, so I apologize for that. That's just something that the back end people need to adjust. So, yeah, you're welcome to come in. Come in. Is that locked?
We lock it.
It's like
Yeah, oh, pull it up.
All right, so let's get started. What we're doing today is we're going to move a little bit further with our RESTful tasks. So yesterday, we did all of our API for the RESTful tasks, and then we also tied it into Angular just a little bit. So we were simply logging what we had gotten back from the API. Now today, what we're trying to do is not only get the tasks, but we want to put them on the screen for the user. So in order to do that, we need to kind of change around how we were organizing our code. So if I go back to this, let's get into RESTful tasks. And again, I've got my source folder. This is where all of our Angular stuff is happening. And inside the app folder, we've got the app component. So all we were doing initially with this app component is that we're getting all of our tasks. And then, of course, the getTasks function, which is inside the service, is just we're just console logging that we got the tasks. So we're going to change this around a little bit so that we can do something with the tasks in the component. And the first thing that I'm going to do is do something with the component. So right now we've got all this boilerplate code that just comes with any new Angular app. Let's take that out. Okay, and let's pretend like we did have some tasks already. We don't yet have them. Yes, questions? Oh, zoom in, yeah, of course. Sorry about that.
No.
I forget to do that sometimes. Okay, so let's pretend for a second like we have our tasks. And how would we go about looping through those things? So we've seen in some other... I know, it's really slow. It's like I press Command plus and it's like a minute later it zooms in. Sorry about that. So in the other languages that we've seen, we always have these ways of looping through things. Whether it be a for each loop, which we were doing in EJS a little bit, or you guys were doing for eaches in Python as well. And I know there was such a thing in Java. So we're going to have something similar here in Angular where we're going to be able to just loop through all the tasks that we have. Okay? And the way that we're going to do that is something called ng4. So this is a directive that's going to tell Angular, I want to go through all the items in this list. The way that we would do that is we would just say ng4. And then what we set that equal to is just essentially going to be our looping mechanism. So we can say let task of tasks, like that. And what that means is that inside each one of these divs, we can display anything that we want about that individual task. So for now, I think probably what we'll do is we'll just output the task title. We don't really need to show the description right now. Let's just say, so to output an individual bit of information, just like we saw in the other languages, we're going to do these double mustache tags. And we can say the property that we want from our task is just going to be the title, so I'm going to do that. And then probably what's going to happen here is that we're going to have an error because, of course, we haven't set our tasks in the component. So if I were to go back to my project here, and I think we're on localhost 3000. So if we go inside of our console, we've got our tasks. We haven't run into any kind of an error, which is a little disconcerting. But let's actually do something where we'll have access to some tasks. So inside my component, I don't yet have a tasks property. All I've got is this title equals public, and we'll get rid of that because we're not really going to use that. Actually, let's just put something in here. So we'll say this is RESTful tasks. Okay, and then if I want to show that in my component, just like how I'm doing with the task.title, let's just put a little header tag here, and then we'll output the title. So it rebuilt for me there, and then if I go like that, now I have my title RESTful task. So that's how we output in Angular the double mustache tags. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to actually set these tasks so that our component has access to them. So what we were doing in here is we were just running this method, the getTasks method, but instead, let's set up a tasks property. So we'll just say tasks equals an empty array for now, because we haven't yet gotten them back from the API. Okay. All right. So nothing should change on the page because again we're just looping through an empty array. But back in here, what we want to do is when we get the tasks, we're going to want to reset this task property to the tasks that come back from the API. So how do we do that? Here inside the service, what we're doing currently is that we're running this underscore http.get, and then we're subscribing to it, and we're just console logging. What if we were to, instead of subscribing to it here inside the service, why don't we subscribe to it inside the component itself so that we can actually do something with the data that comes back? So let's say instead of just getting, let's return the observable that this is going to give us back. And then inside the component, we can subscribe to that. Okay? So now back in the component, I've got this observable from this underscore http.get tasks, and now I want to subscribe to it so that I can set these tasks equal to what comes back. So let's say subscribe, and then I'm going to do a function here that takes in some kind of a response, and we'll just say it's any to appease the TypeScript gods. And then what are we going to set this.tasks to? You guys know? Say that again? It's already an array now, right? But what are we going to do inside this this subscribe callback? Well, I'm really just going to reassign it, right? So rather than pushing in, because that could be kind of tedious, I can just say this.tasks equals the response.tasks. Okay. So what that should do is it's going to reassign our tasks array to whatever array of tasks that we got back from our API. And if we go up in here, we're now looping through our tasks. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about what we're doing here? Like moving around the logic. Before we were subscribing inside the service, now we're subscribing inside the component instead. Okay. So the next thing that we want to do is ask ourselves, according to the assignment here, rather than just pulling all the tasks initially, we're going to have a button that allows us to get all the tasks. So when we click on that button, we're going to go back to the API and grab them rather than just pull them up right when the page loads. All right. So rather than doing this inside the constructor, let's just comment this out for now. And before we get to the next step, I'm going to show you guys something. It's called a life cycle method of Angular, and it has the method is called ng-on-init. And what that means is that once everything in your Angular component is ready to go, it will run whatever callback function you create inside there. So I can do. Here's how we use ng-init. We have to change our component to say that it implements on init. Okay, and then from the Angular core, we also need to bring in on init. And then what I can do is I can run a function that will happen again when this component is loaded and ready to go. So if I were to bring down this, it would still function essentially the same, but let's just get our task from inside ng-on-init. So again, we're still getting the tasks. It's just rather than doing it inside the constructor, we're waiting to do it until the component is all ready to receive data and that sort of thing. Okay, so that's what's called a lifecycle method, and you can read all about it on the Angular doc site here. So a lifecycle hook that is called after Angular has initialized all data-bound properties of a directive. And that method can run in any code that you want to have happen when the component first loads. Okay? So again, now what we're going to do, instead of just loading this thing up on page load, we're going to have a button that we can click to load the tasks for us. So let's go back inside of our app component.html here. And then here, let's create this button that will enable us to get all of our tasks. And we'll say get tasks. Okay, so how do you guys think we tap into a click event on this button?
Parentheses, click, and then equals, and the name of the thing you want it to do when you click.
Yes, exactly. Then you would need to actually signify what is the click handler that I want to have happen when we click on the button. So let's, inside of our button, this is how we, well, first off, let's just talk about how we would do that in, you know what, we're going to skip the jQuery thing because I think a lot of you guys kind of missed that stuff anyway. But inside jQuery, we would target out an element and then we would say .click. So that's how we were doing it there. Here what we're going to do is inside of our actual HTML, we're going to create a click handler by doing this. We just surround the event with parentheses. And then we're going to say when that click happens, let's get our tasks. So we're going to invoke this method getTasks. And then if we look back at our, let me close out our services tab. So if we look back inside the component here, we don't yet have a getTasks function, so let's create one. So when we run this method, all we really want to do is we want to do everything that was inside this. Okay, I'll just move it down. Uncomment that. Okay, so when we click on that button, we're going to invoke the getTasks method, and it should be able to get our tasks for us. So if I reload here, I've got the button getTasks. Cool. Now we're getting the tasks on a button click. Any questions about that? No.
As far as I made it this morning.
Okay, excellent. So, so the other thing that we want to do for this assignment is we also want to be able to, yeah, we want to have a button for each task. which will enable us to show an individual task at the bottom of the page. So let's just create, first thing in the HTML, what I'm going to do is I'll just create a little container for if we have an individual task, we're going to put it there, right, if we're showing a single task. So let's create a div, and then I'm going to use a special directive called ngIf. Okay? This allows us to decide if we want something to happen or not. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to have a selected task, which is just the current task that we're interested in. And I'm going to start out by setting that equal to null. So if there is no selected task, in other words, if it's set to null, then let's just not worry about it. So let's say if selected task does not equal null, then I'm going to put, we'll just say like task here for now. Okay, and then inside the component, what I want to do is I'm just going to create a selected task property. And first off, we'll set it equal to null. Okay. So we shouldn't be getting anything on here yet because, of course, it's null right out the gate. Can still do that. So what we want to do is let's add a button to each one of these tasks so that we can then show the details down at the bottom. So inside here, when we're looping through our task title, let's just add, actually I'll put this in a p tag. Okay, and then we're going to have a button to show the task, so we'll just call it show button, and then we want to do the same thing with this button, is that it needs to have some kind of a click action. So when somebody wants to show that task, let's do something with it. So same thing, and then I want to select task. Okay, what do you think we're going to pass into select task?
The ID from the task type, from that specific task.
That could work. What else could we pass in, theoretically?
If it's,
Yeah, we could pass in the entire task.
oh yeah.
Kind of cool, right? And that way, so because there are a couple different ways that we can handle this. We can either reach back and go and get that single task from the API, or we can just grab it from the data that we already have because we already have all the tasks. All right? So let's do it that way initially. We're just passing the entire task that we're looking at here. And where is this task variable coming from, the one that I'm passing to the argument? It's coming from up here, yeah, from our ng4. Okay, does anybody have any questions about this? So when we're in that loop, we have access to this task object. Okay? So that's what we've got so far, but of course we haven't yet written the method to select a task, so we still need to do that. So if we write a select task method, and then that's going to take in a task. All I really need to do is reassign the selected task. It's null currently. I just need to reassign it to whatever task I passed into the method. So we'll say this dot selected task equals task. Okay, and then inside here, actually we still have task here, so let's just see if this part of it's working. So if I refresh this and I get my tasks, now I've got a button for each one. So if I click this, task here. We've got a placeholder, so I haven't yet put anything about the task. And if I look here in the assignment, all we really need to put is the title of it and the description. So let's just go here inside of our template, and then we'll do like an H3, and we'll say selected. Oops, I want to output this, so I need to do those tags again. Selected task dot title, and then underneath that we'll just put the description. Task dot description. Okay, and then if we want to spruce it up a little bit, because I think they've got some CSS in here. I'll show you guys how we could do that. So the nice thing about these Angular components is that they're all self-contained. So we've got different files for the different functions. We've got our CSS file, we've got our .ts file, which is all the logic, and then the .html, which is the view. So if I go in here inside my component.css, I can just create a class for that. So we'll call this selected task. And then we just want that to have a, I don't know, 4 pixel border, solid green. And then it looks like there's some kind of a border radius on that too. 5 pixels. Okay, and then inside my component, I can just do that, target that class exactly how I do normally. So I can just say class equals selected task. So if we go back, and again, we got to get all of our tasks, of course. It's so easy, right? I mean, it's just it's the same CSS that you guys already know, and we have it right there inside of our component. So the only other thing that we could probably cover here, since we got through a lot quite quickly, is we can cover just getting that single task from the API.
Yeah,
So I think that would kind of make sense. It's just a different way of doing the same thing. All right. So when we select a task, let's come back inside of our component here. Rather than passing in the entire task, let's change this so that we're just receiving a task ID. And then we'll go back to the API and get it. Okay. So here we'll say ID is that. We'll comment this out because we're not going to do this just yet. And then inside my component, I need to change this so that I'm not passing in the entire task anymore. I'm just going to pass in task underscore ID. Okay. Now inside of my service, I need to have, well, actually I already had this. I think maybe I was doing this after yesterday's lecture with Rigel. But basically our get task method is going to take in an ID, and then again we're going to change the logic of this slightly. Instead of subscribing to it inside the service, we're just going to return the observable that this gives us back. So we're going to return this, get rid of that, and then back inside my my component here, I'm going to use my HTTP service. So let's get rid of this real quick, and then we'll say this dot underscore HTTP, and then we'll say get task, and then I'm going to pass in the ID that I just got, and then of course I need to subscribe to that. Oops. Okay, and then we're going to get back this response again. We'll go like that. And then this time, I'm just going to say this dot selected task equals response dot task, because that's how I have my API set up, is that it's coming back. The response has a property called task on it that I want. Okay. Okay. So let's make sure everything's good. We're just passing in the task ID when we click on it, and then that logic should run. So let's give it a shot here. Show that one. That task was not found. Uh-oh. Didn't we test these routes yesterday? Could have sworn. Okay, so if I'm here, hold on one second. API tasks. Okay. Oh, I'm trying to put. Don't make that mistake. So this is a GET request. We just want to make sure that we can get an individual task. Okay, so I've got 2 tasks here. And I can get an individual task, right? Did we not test this yesterday? Maybe I didn't. You know what? I might not have had a route to get an individual task. So if we go back on the server and check the routes, here. Oh, never created that one, huh? So yeah, I guess we'll need it. So we'll just go API/tasks, and then we'll go ID, and then we'll have tasks controller dot get one. Now, of course, we're going to need to create that method because it's going to crash on us. So if I go back inside my tasks controller, we'll do get one. It takes in a request and a response. And then we'll do task dot find by ID, and then just take in the rec dot params dot ID. And then again, we've got this callback function, which takes in an error and a task. And then I'm going to forget about the error for now. We'll just say res.json task, and then result success. Okay. Oh, I didn't put a comma after this, yeah. Okay. All right, so we're good now. Let's test it in Postman real quick. Great, I'm getting the task, so let's go back here and do it again. Get tasks, show that task. Cool. So we end up at the same exact place. It's just this time we're actually making a call to the API to get that individual task. Any questions, comments, or concerns? That's all we were covering today.
Yeah,
Good? All right, guys.